Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Nikhil Shenoy, the CEO of Colvin Run. And Nikhil, if we could just dive right into this, this is for our Digital Transformation of Industry series, and we're very interested in who you are, what your journey has been, and anything that you have to share with us related to the digital transformation of industries. That would be fantastic. So I may interrupt with a few questions here and there to steer it a little bit, but really over to you, Nikhil. If you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for inviting me and having me out here. So I'm Nikhil Shenoy, like you said, CEO, founder of Colvin Run Networks. The original name of the company was datascienceapplications.com. So if you can type all that in without any typos, it'll redirect to Colvin Run. We decided to rename it after a local monument to automation here in Northern Virginia. The land used to be owned by George Washington, and if you look up Colvin Run Mill, it was one of the earliest examples of American automation, using water power to mill wheat and corn. And so, we went with Colvin Run Networks as our name, and we've been around since 2018 was when I went full-time in the company. And the catalyst was, before Colvin Run, I was an engineer, graduated at MIT, then went to work on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs in 2006 to 2010, which was an interesting time to be there. And I started my career building kind of automation tools on the trading desk. I was a strategist, kind of quantitative analyst type of person. And then I went to business school for a couple of years, went to Procter & Gamble because I wanted to learn about, big business and consumer type of industries. And even there, I was kind of a data scientist of last resort. I built tools to manage R&D pipelines and financial forecast support, things like that. And then after there a couple of years, I wanted to do something. I got an invite to work at a venture-backed company in Tyson's Corner, or actually in Falls Church, Virginia, called Castle Systems, and built out their IoT practice. And even there, I was also building spreadsheets and kind of measurements and how we can use key card entry and exit data to do analysis of building occupancy and what we could do with that. So I left Castle in 2018 because P&G, they had a need where they needed, and they were like, hey, this thing that you built once you were here was cool. We still like it. Can you help us out? And we did a small project there and started kind of doing commercial work, me and my co-founder at the time. And then the Virginia Center for Innovative Technology, which has since rebranded to VIPC, gave us a grant to pursue federal business. And so, working with the Virginia SBDC, the Virginia ICAP programs, and all the resources that the Commonwealth gave us, we started applying for these SBIRs, and we won the very first defense SBIR we applied for, which is a project. I'm actually going to the conference next week for the microelectronics integrity meeting. It was we'd been doing some blockchain work, and they had a blockchain-based supply chain risk management solution that they were soliciting. So, we used some of our commercial blockchain qualifications and prototypes that we built, pulled together a team, and we won that one. And I was like, oh man, this is great. Defense contracting is so easy, and not to be the case at all. We ended up losing the next 6 or 7 things that we applied for. And in that journey, built out a board of advisors, brought in some co-founders from the University of Chicago, who also had military backgrounds. And then, we won another one from the Navy. And then kind of from there, we've now, since 2020, won at least 30 award selections. So some good success through the Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR program, which I can talk about more in detail if you'd like. But again, how do we get to focus on AI? So Colvin Run has been positioned as a technology agnostic solutions provider, right? Part of the piece I left out was we started out as a SaaS. We raised a VC, spun the SaaS off, and Colvin Run focused on these kind of mission-driven analytics. So looking at defense problems, how can we apply the best-in-class technologies to, or even better, tools they already have to solve some of these data-driven problems, right? So there's a lot of cloud pieces out there. Even on the most basic level, you look at Excel and there's a little ribbon on top, right? People probably don't use 80% of the buttons. But there's capability that they already have. They just need someone to kind of build it out and show them. And so given that was kind of what I did my entire career, it's exciting that we've been able to build a practice around that.
Hmm.
And then kind of like the blockchain, right? It was just the tool that was available. People want to know what can we do with this. AI came around, so we got our hands dirty, experimented with it, and now we've got a couple projects in the Air Force and Navy looking at how we can use generative AI use cases. So happy to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow. I just want to comment on a couple things you said because I think it's very relevant to the ISIP community. You started as an engineer out of MIT, so you had all
Chemical engineer.
chemical engineers. So
I
you had
never engineered a chemical.
so you had all this quantitative background, but you're a fantastic lifelong learner because you then I loved what you said about you went to a big company to learn how big companies operate. So I mean, when I was at IBM, that you get to see what a big company is like, and it's an experience. It really is. It's a different kind of thing. But then all those successes and not successes that you had with the SBIRs and all of those, that allowed you, with your quantitative background, your business background, you started seeing, okay, there's these emerging technologies that are coming out. This is part of this digital transformation of industries, and people need help to apply these and explore, and that's what you have successfully done. So yeah, I think that message of lifelong learning, building this career is really good for the community. And I'm wondering, we could go in several directions, but data, you talked about AI. So how important is data? Is there too much data? Is there too little data? What are the issues around data? How do you think about data and these quantitative models that you're building?
I mean, there's a lot of rote stuff out there, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You can't just collect the data. You also have to curate it, communicate, and then eventually get to where you can collaborate and crunch the data to actually achieve something together, right? And so how do you turn that data? IBM has their, you mentioned IBM, so they have their AI ladder of
Yeah.
like, it's almost like, oh, what's that called? The needs, right? The basic needs of humans. I forget the name of, do you remember what it was?
Maslow's hierarchy.
That's right. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for data. So there's all kinds of like frameworks out there. I mean, at the end of the day, really, it's people have been getting things done with data for decades, right? Part of what I look for, as if you look for if you're a solutions provider, what is the problem you address? What are the symptoms that people would come to you for? And to me, is generally large spreadsheets that are shared amongst multiple groups or processes that depend on manipulating data between systems with human APIs.
Hmm.
There's a lot of that goes on out there, even to this day, right? And you saw that, we just saw last Friday that IT itself in Microsoft Cloud, $1 trillion company, can all fall apart with one update from some company, turned out to be $80 billion company, CrowdStrike, that most people hadn't even heard of.
Yeah,
Uh, and
I
so,
saw
so
your LinkedIn post on that. It was quite humorous, but sad as well. Yeah.
but it looks like, the uh, the whole world is kind of held together by string and duct tape, and
That
and
was
when and
great.
you ask about quantifying data, it's really hard to do, and people tried to kind of rationalize it.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, we work with the cross-industry standard process for data mining.
Hmm.
So it does matter about the scale and scope of the data, but and what it represents, where it's from, how you got it, how it's stored, what it represents. If you need to marry it to other data forms, how do you join them and make sure that the space and time associated with that representation is accurate? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that kind of curation step. But CRISP-DM is the cross-industry standard process for data mining. It's kind of something, you know, in Colvin Run's journey, we started out looking at agile, and there's P&G has their successful initiative and master plan
Hmm.
product launch, which is simple.
Yeah.
Uh, Gateway, and again, framework for everything. But CRISP-DM I found was actually again IBM
Yeah.
and SPSS modeler kind of pioneered it in the 90s, where you got 6 discrete phases that help you address that data for sustainable data-driven solutions. And so um, the first 2 steps are mission or business and data understanding. We call it mission understanding in our flavor of it, but the idea is that you really want to understand your goals first. And then from there, you want to understand what the data can possibly tell you,
Hmm.
right? Like weather data, you might be able to say that, you know, um, the best pitcher in baseball has never thrown a ball when it's raining outside, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
or he also didn't throw any strikes. So like the thing is that he didn't throw the ball at all. So understanding kind of, and there's the famous example of the um data exercise they did for World War planes that were shot down. They looked at the bullet holes.
Yes.
They didn't realize what the data was. They were trying to fortify where the bullet holes were, but what they forgot to correct for was that these are the planes that made it back. So you want to fortify the places where the bullet holes are not, because those planes didn't make it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of like, I think people get caught up in data and jump to the data preparation, modeling, evaluation before really understanding what it is they want to accomplish and what they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was. I hope that does answer your question.
Yeah, it does. And I'm thinking, I loved your story about how Culver Run got started and even back to the water mills and the early industrialization of the US. But when you meet with a customer today and you're talking to them about AI, it'd be interesting to know two things. One is like, kind of the value proposition where, you know, what what do you say to them about augmentation or automation or the message that you're talking to your customers about? But also, if you could, and I think this is, uh, when you look at the team that's trying to deliver to the customer, and you think about engineering types and marketing and business types and data science types, where do you see, I mean, do you want like, if you wanted to scale Cove and Run, would you want it right across the boards, or is like the systems engineers, or, just some sense of like both the message you have when you talk to customers and then when you look at your own growth and the types of skills that you're going to need in your business. If you could share with us some of your thinking there, that would be great.
Yeah, we're still working on that to a degree. We've kind of settled on this mission-driven analytics as a core principle, and what that means to us really is mission-driven is kind of focused on accomplishing the bigger goal. We understand that we're, depending on how you count, we have 16 people, Colmer and email addresses that we think about every day, right? I think there's really 12 full-time employees, some contractors, and we're growing out that way.
Yeah.
And so when we say mission driven, it's like, how do we kind of find that piece that, the DoD is massive, and it's an industry of industries, right? And then the custom, and you kind of go from the industry down to the sub industry of the Navy, and you go down to the Air Force or whatever. And then in those, they got units and the program executive offices, and there's a whole body of literature just how to navigate, where the services and products kind of fit into that ecosystem. It takes a long time, a lot of regulatory pieces and things like that. Um, and so to distill it down and make it simple, we just say adoption is the only metric that matters, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the subcomponents of adoption, people want to use things that are fast, not just performant within the product itself, but that they can readily access it, right? So it's fast to get things done. It's also fast to get it loaded onto your systems. And so we've tried to focus more on technologies that are either already proven commercially and need to be tweaked a little bit for government. Like we're working with partners like Cavionics, startup for rapid authority to operate and cybersecurity. And we're working with partners as large as Google Cloud, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Microsoft as well in their Azure AI stuff. So that entire spectrum of technologies is being developed out there, basically subsidized by public R&D and venture capital. And then how can we be the connective tissues to bring that into the defense market is how we think and talk about that.
Got
So that's fast. The second pillar of adoption is intuitive.
it. Hmm.
I think that there's still some like it's such an emphasis on training in the military, especially. But how much training do you need for an Uber app, right? It's got a very specific focus that says, all right, I need to be picked up. And there are some bumps along the way where people are like, oh, I'm getting into a stranger's car, but now people do it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so making that intuitive, getting that comfort level and that familiarity and just, kind of pre-processing all the difficulties, right? Because there's so much that goes on in the back end of Uber with matching and,
Right.
payments and all those other, pieces going on. Um, how do you make it as simple as possible for that front end user to deploy it and use it, right? So one of our projects, we're working with IBM to authenticate drones.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
But that's a plumbing use case, right? It's really not that I want to go through every step to authenticate a drone. There are things that need to happen, but how can the system, let us use a variety of drones for a specific mission set, um, seamlessly,
Yeah.
right? And so trying to kind of abstract away as much of the inner workings as possible and just get to that mission driven part, intuitive is key.
Got it.
And then the last piece is impactful, right? So it's fast, intuitive, impactful. And impact to me means, nice to have versus need to have. How do, and even there, um, do we need to send people home an hour earlier every day when they're working, 2 or 3 hours of overtime to maintain ships? I mean, I think that that's maybe nice to have, but it also is important for morale, retention, and all these other things, right? So if you can use data-driven tools to help get ships out to sea faster, have our mission readiness, and make a real impact on the turnaround times just by simply, marrying data sets that tell you if hot work is going on next to gas work, I think that that's pretty impactful stuff. I mean, as simple as that may sound. So again, fast, intuitive, and tactful, driving adoption, all based on that mission driven is kind of the message that we put
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, I love that. I think 20 years from now, we're going to look back and I think you're right. That metric on speed of adoption is going to be the one that drove everything. You'll look at the successes and it's like, the open AI, 100 million users within 2 months, talk about speed of adoption. That was like, boom. Yeah, I think you're
I think
right.
that's another thing is that OpenAI, it's like exponentially getting better every time they put something out there and a lot of hype around it. But you're seeing now, I mean, I don't know if you follow stock markets, but like the last 2 days have been a bloodbath because the financial results are lagging a little bit to people's expectations. But I
Yeah,
think that we will catch up eventually.
yeah. It's a race. It's a race. They feel like they're in a
Not a
race for
chatbot.
sure.
Like AI is not a chatbot, right? Yes, there's large language and there's ways to kind of abstract away a lot of what's going on where I can ask for something 60 different ways and get a good enough result, right? I can program the game Snake for me. I'd like to create a version of Snake that resembles the one that T83. Let's build Snake. Ready? And there's many different ways to prompt and get the same similar results. Um,
So for hiring, is it like T-shapes that you look for, or do you look like deep in the engineering, data science, business, or do you look for people who kind of bring it all together, who've had experience that's relevant? Where do you, when you think about growing, um, you know, assuming the business supports growth, how do you think about hiring?
Well, we've kind of gone through a few iterations, right? At first, I hired people that were very experienced, kind of looking like, all right, well, you want to be like a big company, bring in big companies. We had people from like major primes join our company.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's tough because it's a fundamentally different
Yeah,
uh, game. Going from, a startup to a small business and scaling is very different than joining a large business where you already have all the resources available to you.
right.
Um, and so really, my main focus now has been hiring on aptitude, right?
Yeah.
And right. So it's not just what skills you have, it's how can you learn fast? Can you adapt?
Hmm.
Can you change your ways? Are you coachable? Are you willing to, try new things? And then at the same time, one of our most recent hires who's already been promoted and has 3 people working for him was a 20 plus year Air Force veteran,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
Brings
Yeah.
that wealth of experience, but he's relatively new to the commercial world. He had a stop in between, but now he gets it, and he's kind of coaching me up actually
Hmm.
on how to kind of graduate from a hair on fire startup to a smoldering hair small business.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Wow, what a great answer. And my next question, and we should probably wrap up soon, is next 2 questions. How do you keep up with accelerating change? And then any last questions I should have asked that I didn't. So over to you. How do you keep up with accelerating change?
I learned by doing, right? Like when blockchain was all the rage, I was like, all right, let's try it out.
Yeah.
you know, like can this actually replace uh um currency, or can we actually, replace credit reporting systems and take that idea and apply it to microelectronics? We'll
Mhm.
find out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I like and the other great thing that our country provides uniquely is that small business innovation research, right? They encourage you to come up with like crazy ideas and feasibility studies, but as long as it's fast, intuitive, impactful, we use that in all of our offerings, and crisp DM is our process. They pay us to find out,
Yeah.
right? Like the SBR program, they're literally like saying, "Here's some money. I have a couple use cases and problems, and as long as you can kind of triangulate the technology, the problem, and the people that are benefiting from it, and kind of build something that is again fast, intuitive, impactful that they want to use and adopt."
Yeah.
Um, there's no end to how you can advance your knowledge and stay on top of it, right? I do think that generative AI, it's kind of like moving from a horse and buggy to a car in terms of like if Excel is kind of the horse and buggy, or old data kind of BI tools, and then AI is kind of the next again, I'm probably talking about this completely wrong. People will look at this video clip and they'll be like the Today Show, what's the internet? But for
No,
me,
I don't think so, Nikhil. I think your answers are
but the way,
fantastic.
putting myself a little bit of risk here, I reserve the right to be wrong about this. But I think that a lot of the AI use cases we're seeing today would be like, if a horse could travel 30 miles per day, you know,
Yeah,
we're going 50 to 60 miles with this car, right? I really think that with generative AI, the use cases of going at that, well, what if you drive 600 miles in a day,
yeah,
haven't really been well understood, or I think that people are talking about them,
yeah,
but it's getting to that point, right? That next like quantum leap in capability, I
mm,
think we believe that it's been huge by going from 30 to 60 miles. But what people don't understand is that those 600-mile use cases are still out there. We can eliminate entire workflows and, I hate to say it, but entire workforces,
yes,
you know,
yes.
using
Disrupt.
stuff like,
Yeah,
and it's a scary thought, but I think it's a good thing to change, right? Nobody would argue that we should stay with horse and buggies with,
yeah, yeah,
everything was spread all
yeah.
over the.
And what you said about, the people who can learn fast and take coaching,
Yeah.
people who don't just dig in their heels and think they're right all the time. It's really that ability to learn fast and say, I can take coaching. I'm part of a team. I better be able to take coaching because, it's what the others think of me as well. It's not just how great I am, it's like how good are we as a team. And then you're right, there's infinite possibilities as advanced technologies come out, all these 600-mile use cases. Somebody's got to explore them and you're going to get some wrong, right? But that's the
Yeah,
SBIR.
600 miles east, you're in the ocean, right? So
So,
it's
so
not good. But
yeah, go ahead.
no, the other question that I wanted to kind of put out there was like, if anybody watching this is thinking about starting a business, right? I think the most important thing for me anyway, and being kind of on my way to being successful, I'd like to argue, is do the work, right? Like I notice a lot of leaders like think that they can just lead
Yeah.
by telling other people to do things that they haven't done themselves. But for the first couple of proposals, write them yourself and then bring in somebody, right? If you're trying to code something, even if you're not the best coder in the world, at least try. Like, can you stand up a notebook and run a small simulation and give it to the professionals and modify it? And then the other thing is I took for granted at P&G and Goldman Sachs and some of the places that I worked a lot of those soft skills, and now I get it, right? There's a great meme out there with a blue fan, and this guy's telling requirements, right? I want a blue fan with blue blades, wired to a battery, and when it turns on, it should spin. And so they turn it on, and the battery spins, because like so having that level of communication, I think people sometimes make a lot of assumptions, whereas you've got to have that, and it's not just communicating, right? You
Mm.
want to kind of talk less, but say more relevant things in the way you communicate. And that's something I've been trying to learn and get better about myself.
Mm.
If you couldn't tell from the interview.
I think it's a fantastic interview. Thank you so much, Nikhil,
Yeah,
for
I hope
sharing
this helps.
your experience.
Nikhil at colvinrun.com.
Yeah,
If you need my information, I'm happy to talk to anybody out there or find me on LinkedIn.
fantastic. I'll stop the recording.